name. You can just put anonymous CYMG participant, whatever most comfortable for you. But I will let the rest of the lovely people take it away. Go for it, Samuel and Clive.
Thank you, Shelan, for the housekeeping rules. Yes, if you don't want to be recorded, you can rename yourself to CYNG participants. And yeah, we have here Clive Donley, the global coordinator, one of the global coordinator of the Children and Youth Page Group to UNEP, tuning in from Nairobi, Kenya. Your Excellency Clive, please, you may have the floor.
Thank you so much, Samuel. Sheila, are you able to present about to do the PowerPoint on about the constituency?
I'm not sure where the recent one is. I can find it though.
Okay.
I thought you were going to present that.
Okay,
Let me get it.
Yeah, then it's cool. I can just do quickly. Yeah, thank you so much, Sheila, Samuel, and colleagues for organizing, working tirelessly to ensure that we are having this session, which the last sessions was also very, very informative. And quickly, I want to introduce what Children and Youth Major Group is. So Children and Youth Major Group is a recognized umbrella mechanism, an official youth engagement mechanism under UNEP. And as a constituency, this is a formal engagement mechanism. And we are working to advocate for inclusion, empowerment, and meaningful participation of children and youth in global environmental governance. And this was established under Agenda 21 of the Rio Convention in 1992. And therefore, the constituency has continued to be a strong pillar for young people to advocate for their pursuits, linking in advocacy, knowledge sharing, capacity building, and also youth engagement in various processes. In terms of avenues that we engage in, we have UNEA, the UN Environment Assembly, which is coming up quickly. We've also engaged in various of the MEAs, including the Vienna Convention on Montreal Protocol. In terms of science policy, we have also been contributing effectively in the IPCC process, the GEO process, IPBES. We are also closely following in UNEP flagship and assessment reports like the emissions gap reports, the global adaptation report. We also engage in various multilateral processes, including the Plastics Treaty, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on Plastic, and also the Regional Seas Program. In terms of global initiative, we also participate in UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, where we have representation, also the Green Jobs for Youth Pact, Faith for Earth, which recently was ended its process. We also have various UNEP-led initiatives, including we engage in a lot of international days. As a constituency, we have 13 thematic working groups. So in these 13 thematic working groups, you can be able to take part in them and engage in areas that you feel are effectively for you or are best for you to engage. For example, we have chemicals and waste, we have children affairs, we have adaptation gap, adaptation and resilience working group, we have eco-faith, environmental law, and so on. But we also engage in UNEP's Committee of Permanent Representative, which is more of a subsidiary body or a subsidiary process to the UN Environment Assembly. And we've been providing direct inputs into the flow, linking in solid perspective or solid positions that children and youth want. And this is always coordinated through our policy working group, where we have various capacity building sessions to get inputs, and these inputs they're able to help in developing youth positions. And now that you're going into UNEA, we've also been developing our positions into the UN Environment Assembly and also into the ministerial declaration, where we've been coordinating this with Samuel. And most of our inputs that we've shared actually this year have been taken into consideration into the declaration. And actually, the third paragraph recognizes the Youth Environment Assembly, just shows how inputs that we are collecting or a position that we are supporting as a constituency are strong and solid. And other areas, avenues we engage in, we also engage in the group of friends, in group of UNEP's group of friends, whereby I also co-chair this alongside the Deputy Ambassador of the Netherlands. And the group of friends, we're trying to see how best we can strengthen and solidify meaningful participation of civil society stakeholders and major groups in core UNEP led processes, including member states and major groups and stakeholders. And three priorities that we're working on is to enhance participation, strengthen collaboration, and also achieve common goals that we feel are effectively or needs to be strengthened. Mostly now that you're going to UNEA, this has been a very big avenue for us to support our inputs as a constituency and to see how best we can ensure these inputs are taken into consideration and they effectively contribute to multilateral decision-making avenues. And how you can join this constituency for the first timers, we will share the link here in the chat. But also when you go to our website under join, you can able to join as an individual or register your organization. And Children and Youth Major Group, we are not only a major group, but we are a major group with a collection of members, individual members, and also accredited and non-accredited organizations. And feel free to join. Feel free to also join the working groups for the constituency and how you can be able to contribute effectively towards youth engagement through the constituency. Up to that, I want to pass the mic back to Shilan. If there is anything you want to add on or anyone who might be able to, maybe you want to ask a question, but I pass the mic back to you.
Thank you so much, Clive. And it's so great to see so many familiar faces. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Shellen Sailing. As Clive mentioned, the Youth Plastic Action Network, I am currently serving as the interim chair. I am mainly involved in the United Nations Plastics Treaty negotiations. In fact, I'm excited to return to Kenya because that's where really this journey began. And if I wasn't probably in Kenya, I wouldn't have met Alex, Clive, and so many other amazing individuals as well. And just to quick overview, the Youth Plastic Action Network is the newest youth constituency along with CYMG. There's many different youth constituencies, and we are going to hopefully be the official, I like to say maybe the best way to describe it to those who don't know what a constituency is, it's kind of like a coalition or a network. And we will hopefully be, well, we will be the youth constituency to hopefully the future plastics treaty once we get the plastics treaty as well. And so for those of you, I'll introduce Alex. I won't do it in the most traditional sense because I think Alex would prefer that. This is Dr. Alexandra Harrington. However, you could just call her Alex. How we started this journey was actually on the floor of INC 5.1. We were in the session about chemicals and we were talking about how people don't often understand negotiations. And with that comes mental health as well as, different other things. And that kind of erupted to this. Alex also loves chocolate and coffee, as well as she has a plastics treaty love story, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. So if you're at UNEA, both of us will have chocolate as well. So come find us. But I'll give it away to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Shellen. And I do appreciate the fact that we can all just be very kind of equal and have a good laugh as well as learning things. So welcome to all of you. Many of you are returning members to this conversation. It's so great to see so many of you again. And it's really lovely to welcome those of you who are new to this process. And a huge thank you, of course, to CYMG and YPAN and to Shellen and to Vaughn and to Samuel and Clive and Steve and everyone else who's really made this such a really vibrant group that I love being a part of and advising. So thank you all for that. And indeed, Shellen, I realized that a year ago, we were pretty much sitting on that floor in Korea. So there's that sobering thought. So for those of you who are involved in the Plastics Treaty, INC, what we knew only as INC 5, but what we now know as 5.1 was indeed taking place a year ago. So that is another conversation for another day, but certainly something that we can have many conversations about in Nairobi in the coming few weeks.
It's been a year.
Well, for you next
oh my
week.
gosh.
It's been a year. I know, it's a sobering thought, really. And I think there had been a question about what will happen at 5.3. So we'll talk about that at the end if we have time. Just to give an update for those of you who've not had a latest update from us. So we'll talk about that at the end. But I will share my screen now and we will have a bit of a conversation about UNEA. And for many of you, hopefully you'll be joining us in UNEA and you'll be able to participate. And this really is intended to be a bit of a background. It will one day, my friends, I will learn how to just do this in proper, there you go, full screen mode. It will just have a bit of an overview for you. So those of you who've taken the course before or the longer bootcamp we did this summer, you will remember a bit of the opening on international law, just to give you a framing of kind of what happens, what these processes do, and how they work in the overall international law setting. And then we will talk specifically about what UNEA is and also what it does. So it should hopefully be interesting. If at any point there are questions, please pop them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, I may be able to see some of them. We will see. But Shellen, if you see something particularly urgent, just kind of let me know, and we'll go from there. My formal, for those of you who don't know me, my formal title, or one of them, is at the moment, at least, as chair of the IUCN Royal Commission on Environmental Law's Agreement on Plastic Pollution Task Force. We do anticipate that this will be made into something slightly bigger and more overall pollution focused in the near future. But until we get to about December, this is what we still have, which is more than enough. I also am formerly was a lecturer in law and a law professor in international law and environmental law, especially international organizations, and am currently based in Canada, where I am between Ottawa and McGill in Montreal, doing various research positions and scholar positions. Which is to say, if you're in Canada, please let me know. There are some who are already here who I've had a chance to meet and get to know very well. So please do let me know. So in terms of our general objectives, just quickly, because I always think it's important for you to know kind of what we're doing today. I wanted, as I have done, just explain everything quite quickly. Also, make sure that you know that the intended audience is all of you. It doesn't matter if you are lawyers or studying law or have studied law, or if you have absolutely no background at all in law or in anything international, that's fine. It is intended to cut across. So if there are questions that come up, or if there are phrases that you're not familiar with, I really encourage you to ask, because most likely somebody else will have that same question as well. But please don't feel like you have to have a really strong background in this, because the idea is you don't. And we teach you very quickly the nuts and bolts of things that you need to know. By the end of this course, we are hoping that you will be able to take the quiz. No, that you will actually be able to understand a bit more what UNEA is, and that will involve a little bit of history, right? Just talking about where UNEA came from, because it's important to understand, especially now in the geopolitical context that we have. It's important to understand how it has developed the way that it has, and some of the very unique aspects that are in the UNEA rules of procedure, for example, that are not in, for those of you who are familiar with the plastics context, are not in those rules of procedure, or is not as settled as in those rules. So they do give us a greater flexibility in what types of decisions can be taken. But if you don't know this, it can be very difficult to understand what's going on at UNEA. So we want to set this groundwork and allow you to go into the sessions before the official start of UNEA in December, and then also during that meeting, and have an understanding of what's going on and how you can participate in what is going on. And obviously, then you will get to take the quiz. As I mentioned earlier when we were joking about it, it is not intended to be a frightening quiz. There's no outside reading. You do not need to Google anything. You do not need to ask ChatGPT for assistance. It truly is a very short quiz that just will tell us you were here and you participated. So that is really it. So to start with, very fundamental question, very difficult question for many people, even lawyers who are trained like nationally, as most of us are. What is international law? And how does it differ from domestic law, what we call national law as well? And then how does all of this work together? And why am I raising this in the context of a discussion about UNEA? I'm raising it because the UNEA is the UN Environment Assembly. It is a governing body of an international organization, of the UN Environment Program, but it has a specific function as an international organization. And UNEA has a specific role within the organization, and then also in terms of what happens in the national law realm as well as the international law realm. So before we can really understand what the impact of a resolution is coming out of UNEA, we have to understand some really basic things about international law and this whole system. So when we think about national law first, so no matter where you are in the world, you will be subject to a national law system, as well as usually a provincial or a territory or a state-based system, and then something a bit lower, like a city or a township, or a municipality. And the way that we explain national law is that it's kind of like um, this inverse pyramid. So the bottom, which would be flipped, so the biggest part, is the national system. So the national system is most important in the inverse pyramid because it's the holder of most legal capacity. And then as we move down each layer, it gets to be less and less and more narrow in terms of what a particular area can regulate. So if we have a national law, say in Canada, since I'm here in Canada, we have a national law that relates to all of Canada. And then we move down the next step to provincial laws, which govern only the particular province. So I'm in Quebec, so the province of Quebec can say that you do certain things or you don't, but that's only in the province of Quebec. And then you move down to, say, the citywide level. So I'm in Montreal. So only rules about, say, traffic and parking in Montreal, and sometimes even lower to like a little subunit of a city. So we have that here as well. And in that pyramid, everything flows this way. The greatest power is at the top because it is considered that the state is a sovereign, so it has ultimate control over what is going on in its territory. And it is able to say something is so important, it is a national rule, it's a national law, and then everything else kind of trickles down from there. We are all used to these systems. We typically all work within these systems. International law is very different. International law has one row, if you will. It is a horizontal thing. And it is a horizontal thing because the powers between each country are legally the same. Now, obviously, geopolitically, this might not be the case, but legally, every country, once it is recognized by, for example, by the UN system or by other countries, is considered to be a sovereign state. So it has the ability to control what's going on inside. And then also it is supposed to protect the sovereign rights of other states outside. So say we recognize you, then we are going to also make sure that your borders are not crossed, for example, by an invading force, or we're supposed to protect you in these situations. And that means that everyone is speaking to each other equally. So when we have, for example, a negotiation, as some of you will know from various treaty processes, we have the member states coming into the room and they are all talking at the same legal rights holding level. So every country is speaking to another country on the same plane, on the same level. There's no differentiation between groups of states or between a state itself versus a group. they're all considered to be sovereign and the same, which means that when they take a decision and they have to do two things. They have to agree to it. And typically in the treaty context, that means to sign it. So whenever we get a plastics treaty, when Shellen and I and everybody else involved in this process are done eating all the chocolate we possibly can to celebrate, it will be signed, right? There will be a big formal event and it will be signed when we're in our chocolate haze. And then after that, that is step one. And then step two for the vast majority of countries is that then you have to take that international law that has been agreed to by all the different states on this same level, and you have to take it home and make it a national law as well to make it nationally binding. So you have to put it in the inverse pyramid, and typically it's at the national level only, so it just stays at that very top level. Which means that there is an interplay, right? There's a role for national law and international practice when we are creating international law. And they work together often very well. Sometimes they don't. So sometimes we'll get instances where a country will sign on to, say, join an international organization or to join a treaty agreement internationally. But then when it goes to take that home and to have it adopted as a matter of national law, it doesn't work. So, for example, one of the most prominent and durable examples of this comes from the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is obviously a bit more human rights than environment, but it's still the most durable example, in which the United States of America was very active in creating the treaty process. It's signed onto the treaty process, indicating its intention to be bound by it. However, it has been unable to actually get this passed its own internal legal systems. It's a Congress and it's Senate, in this case, it's Senate. So it's still not legally bound. It has not ratified that treaty. And this can create a bit of tension. And I mention this here because when we see what will be coming up in terms of the acts of we'll get to momentarily. Well, we're already there now, kind of. When we see what's coming up in terms of the acts of UNEA, it's important to remember what they are and what they aren't. So as a hint, the resolutions from UNEA will typically be legally binding, so an obligation for the executive director of the UN Environment Program, if she is referenced, for the Secretariat of the UN Environment Program, because these are the governing entities in the organization telling them that they have to do something or not do something as members of the organization. However, when we get to a resolution that says something about the member states and then being encouraged to do something, for example, that is not legally binding, because that is something that would have to be taken home and adopted at home in each country in order for it to be legally binding. So it's important to know this from the beginning and to think about that as we're setting up what the discussions will be and the discussion points will be in UNEA, to understand kind of what obligations are there for individuals who will be named in the resolutions, as well as for entities that will be named in the resolutions. And I give you this last, hopefully inspirational look at the world that we are trying to present here and to preserve in terms of where does international law apply. International law itself applies in some cases, so in human rights context particularly, globally, so everywhere, because there are certain norms that we say are absolutely vital, absolutely critical, like the prohibitions on genocide and slavery and piracy, for example. But for everything else, international law applies where it has been agreed to by the countries. So the countries really are the important part here. I see a number of things in the chat. I can't see the chat. So if there is anything hugely important, please feel free to tell me. We won't get into sources because I think we can go beyond that and just have a better conversation about UNEA. So UNEA itself, the UN Environment Assembly, is a relatively new entity. It was initially founded, or it was part of the UN Environment Program. Its antecedents were. The UN Environment Program was created itself. So the organization we know as UNEP, colloquially and affectionately as UNEP, was created in 1972. And it was created by an international organization to be an international organization. And an international organization is an organization that is made up of member states. It can, depending on the type of organization and also what the members agree that they want it to do or not. It can also have direct members who are not necessarily state parties, but who are representing state parties in different capacities. So the International Labor Organization is actually a really interesting example of this, where they have what they call a tripartite system. So they have representatives from each country who are representing their national governments, so representing the government of Kenya, for example. But then they also have representatives who are from the labor sector and from the business or commercial sector. It's a bit unusual. Typically, you see only members who are actually states, but it can happen, and it does happen periodically. And an international organization is a coming together of states and sometimes others to create an organization. It is not a natural thing. It's not something we find in nature. It is something that has to be created, very much like a corporation in many different countries in their legal systems, and to create it with a particular goal. So after World War II, the UN itself was created by a number of states at the time, with the idea of preserving peace, peace and security, and furthering the goals that we see in the UN Charter. And from this, we have the development of organizational bodies, so the Security Council, the General Assembly, etc. And the UN Environment Program was one of those things that came out of the General Assembly's creation in 1972. And so it was created as a separate entity within the UN system, so reporting back to the UN General Assembly, but its own separate entity with its own foundational documents, its own leadership, its own secretariat to guide it, and its own set of member states, so states that wish to be a part of it. And from 1972 until 2013, the way that the General Assembly had structured the UN Environment Program and the way that it functioned was that it was subject to oversight from what we called the Governing Council. So the Governing Council was 58 members of the entire member state body. So it was not everybody. And this is really important. It was not everybody. It was 58 members who were elected from all the other member states to serve on the Governing Council, to serve as the decision-making body for UNEP, and to issue resolutions and decisions and guide the way that the organization functioned and worked. This became very criticized and very difficult as we had a number of additional countries. From 1972 onwards, we had a great deal more countries coming into existence and joining and wanting to be part of this organization. And so there was an inherent question about how fair it was to only have 58 members be the governing council. It wasn't even as though it was set up between like a Security Council and the General Assembly, where you have two different bodies, one that is elected and one that is open. This was just the one that was elected. And so there was a push to have major reform of UNEP, of the way it's governed, of the way that it works, which ultimately came into the decision taken by first the Governing Council itself, and then ultimately endorsed by the UN General Assembly, which is from 2013, to change the structure, completely change the structure. And to change the structure so that rather than having 58 countries sitting on the Governing Council, we would have a new entity that would be renamed. So UN Environment Assembly, so completely renamed. You're probably going to hear a bit of, I should point out, a bit of noise momentarily in the background. There you go. My fire alarm has been malfunctioning ever since a fire test last week. So I think it's under control for the day. It may go off again. I apologize. So the decision was taken to rename entirely. So it's no longer the governing council. It doesn't sound so kind of authoritarian. It's the UN Environment Assembly. And the decision was made to switch and to have every member of UNEP be part of UNEA. So every member now has the right to a vote. Every member is present in the UNEA context. Every member can participate, take the floor, and is involved in governing decisions. It was a very major switch. And it informs the way that we think about UNEA and the importance of UNEA, because it allows us now to think about it as a completely open system where every country is able to share its views. Every country is able to vote on what is important to that particular country. And so it really changes the dynamic. And it's also allowed for a lot more opening up in terms of things like having the major groups and having the major groups present, opening up to much more civil society participation. Because obviously, if you're having it as an elected body that is a much smaller body than the entire membership, it becomes a bit more elite in a sense. It becomes a bit more difficult to access. But if you are having it open to everyone, it also creates a much stronger platform and argument to then have civil society groups, the major groups, come in and be very present and very active at UNEA. So this is a really important piece of history to talk about, just so you understand where this shift has come from, and also that it's very new, right? It is now 12 years old. We have not had 12 meetings of UNEA, as the UNEA 7 name might suggest to you. The timing has been a little bit staggered. So sometimes it occurred every 2 years, and then more recently it has occurred every year. Again, this is responsive based on the considered needs of the members and the executive director of UNEP and the secretariat. Now, we talk about UNEA. We are all very excited to go. We are all very excited to be at the UN compound in Nairobi, and many of us are very, very excited to be back in Kenya again. But the question is, what are we going to do? So we are all, or many of us are going to be there. Those of you who are not joining us will be waiting to see what is decided. What does it decide? What does it do? Obviously, there's an element of kind of circus is more applicable, I think, for some of the other cups, but an element of things going on outside the negotiation rooms. So we have things like side events, official side events, and unofficial side events, etc. But what are we really here for at the end of the day? We are here primarily for the resolutions that will be adopted by member states, and that will serve a number of different roles for the UN Environment Program, for guiding member states, for guiding various elements of civil society. So for guiding the major groups, for guiding civil society organizations, and allowing them to figure out what they want to be a part of and where they want their voices to be in the future. And it also allows us then to guide what will happen at UNEA 8. So there are a number of different roles of these resolutions. The resolutions set the course for UNEP. So they tell UNEP, this is what we want you to do. So especially geared towards the executive director and the secretariat, we want you to focus on these things. We are asking you to devote time and resources to particular topics, or to convening particular forms of expert groups or meetings, etc. And then requesting that member states also support this in their various capacities, and also requesting civil society be present and involved, and experts, for example, be present and involved. So you will see when we get momentarily to the discussion of what is coming up on the agenda, at least what we know are some of the draft resolutions offered so far. A number of them have proposals for the creation of expert groups, expert study groups, et cetera, to give insights and information at future meetings of UNEA that will allow us then to see what policy might be on the agenda for the future. So that's one thing. The other thing that is near and dear to many of our hearts, especially in the plastics context, because this was the last example, was the ability, or is the ability, to have UNEA resolutions that guide the opening of treaty negotiations. So as I can, chant, and most of you involved in the plastics process will be able to do kind of in your sleep, in 2022, UNEA adopted Resolution 514, which opened up the treaty negotiation process for the plastics treaty as we colloquially know it. I want to point out here, and perhaps it is important for the quiz. I will give some hints here. Perhaps it's important for the quiz to pay attention to this. The resolutions from UNEA can open a negotiation process. They can encourage the secretary or the executive director to create the space. They can encourage the secretariat to help facilitate, etc. But the one thing that UNEA cannot do itself is actually negotiate a treaty. It can give the space, it can give the room, it can be a statement from the member states that they want to do this. It can give, as we know from plastics, the parameters of what we are actually negotiating, so the full life cycle of plastic pollution. But it cannot actually negotiate a treaty on its own. That is something that is not within the power of the UN Environment Assembly. It also was not within the power of the Governing Council. So I think this is something that's really important to know for a number of reasons, including the fact that there are often, I think, a lot of assumptions made if you're not really familiar with this system about what the UNEA process can do. And I tend to get a lot of questions now about, oh, well, there are issues with the plastics treaty negotiation, so why don't we just have UNEA negotiate it? This is why. So I really want to stress that to you, and it's probably on your quiz. Anyway, I'm hearing some feedback in the background. I'm not sure if anyone else is hearing that. It could just be my headphones. But if you do have your mic open, please do just take it off for the moment. Thank you. Other things that the resolutions can do, they can guide information gathering. And I know sometimes this seems a bit less attractive or less operational and intensive than the treaty negotiations, for example, but it's really important. They can guide information gathering, the generation of scientific understanding, and also help us to prepare for the potential future treaties that we may see in the next few years being negotiated. So the plastics process did not just happen alone. We'll use plastics not only because it's something many of us work in, but also because it's something that is the most recent example. Apologies. Where we didn't just get to 2022 and have a feeling that we should have a treaty. We actually had several iterations of UNEA creating open-ended working groups, having study groups, et cetera, that looked at the problem of plastic pollution, and that ultimately determined there was a need scientifically as well as legally, there was a need to have a dedicated treaty on this topic. So resolutions can lay the groundwork for that. And some have already started to, for example, in the mining and the minerals context, have already started to do that. So resolutions have that power to build not only for the work until the next UNEA meeting, but into several future iterations of UNEA. And also the idea of what a UNEA resolution can do relates to, and this is really a bit more boring, I think, for many people, but it's very critical. It relates to the ability of the member states when they are meeting in UNEA, when they are taking these decisions, to create or to refine or redesign governance mechanisms within the UNEP structure. So there is an ability to say we're going to create an expert group for example, for mining and minerals, or for glaciers and the cryosphere, as we'll talk about momentarily, because that is the subject of one of the intended draft resolutions. And in this way, it allows the member states to approve shifting people, shifting resources, sometimes creating expert groups that are made up of people completely outside of the UNEA system to come in and give advice and expertise in how the organization works itself. Because as much as we all tend to focus on the major policy issues, which of course we do and we should, it is also important to remember that UNEA is deciding on organizational functions of an international organization. And so it helps to define where UNEP will go in the future based on what type of governance mechanisms it comes up with. And it will also look at things like, I should point out, budgeting. And of course, budgeting we can expect to be very critical and crucial this year, since we know that in the year since our last meeting, there have been a number of geopolitical changes. There have been a number of economic changes. Certainly, we know that the UNEP staff itself, particularly unfortunately those in Nairobi, have been heavily hit by the threat of staff cuts. So we can expect that part of this governance system discussion in UNEA 7 will also look at how to make things work and how to, for example, share resources and share knowledge across different types of, for instance, pollution issues, rather than perhaps spending additional funding on duplicating efforts, et cetera. So these are all things that can be decided by UNEA resolutions. Which gets us to this question of how is UNEA structured? And there are many formal things that I will omit from this discussion. If you really want to know all the little details, the rules of procedure are a good read for that. And if you need trouble or you're having trouble and you need help finding them, I'm happy to send them to you, or just we can share them with you afterwards, because they are very important. But we cannot have a discussion about UNEA without talking about the rules of procedure. And I don't only say that as a lawyer, I promise. It is actually really important. There are a number of things that are important about telling us, how we have the meetings, the timing of the meetings, notice periods, etc. But when we're in UNEA, there are some things that are very important. And there are things that have become increasingly important over the past several years, particularly in the context of voting. We saw it most recently in the last several days, in particular, coming out of COP30 in Belém for UNFCCC, that voting rights issues were being raised. We have seen it in the plastics treaty negotiations. We have seen it in various instances of the last two Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention issues. We know that Minamata still has bracketed, the Minamata Convention on Mercury still has bracketed text on voting. So voting is really critical. And voting in UNEA, for those of you who find the voting questions to be frustrating in plastics, in BRS, in Minamata, I have good news for you. Voting in UNEA is different. So voting in UNEA was clarified by the rules of procedure, which were adopted in 2016. Interestingly, several years ago, there was an effort to try to reform some of them, but this was not on it. So the way that UNEA works is that each member state has a vote, has one vote for resolutions, for decisions, for anything that comes before UNEA. And the decisions are made by, and I quote, a majority of members present and voting. Now, again, this information on this slide may be important for your quiz. What does this mean? Majority of members present and voting. Because it seems like majority of members present. Okay, fine. You look around the room, you see who's there, and then you figure out whatever the number is, and you divide it in half, and then you add one, and there you go. We're good. What the end voting part here means is that there is the ability of any member state to decide to abstain. So decide it is not going to vote either way. It's not going to vote yes, it's not going to vote no, it's just not going to vote. And that whenever a member decides to do that, it is taken out of the equation. So we may have, let's see, I've talked about Canada, I've talked about Kenya. I will pick on the United Kingdom since it's my home country. We may have the United Kingdom sitting in the conference room, in the meeting room in Nairobi, and they may be present for a discussion of one of the resolutions, but they may decide that they don't politically, or for whatever other reason, but typically it's politically, they don't want to vote. They don't want to go on record. They don't want to say yes. They don't want to say no. So they abstain. And what that means is they then no longer exist in this equation. So if it was 150 countries present at the time, we're looking at present and voting, we take away one. So it's now 149. So that is why the end voting is critical, because you may have a certain number of countries present, but it might be far fewer who are actually voting. So that means the majority you have to hit is less. So it's a niche, it's a nuance, but it's important if you're sitting there, if you're really attached to one of the resolutions, and you are trying to figure out what number might be needed to get to the threshold, that's important to know. Some other things that are just important to know, because every resolution has to be voted on. So every resolution will require a vote one way or the other. Typically, what we do is we have, unlike some other UN practice, we have a show of hands. So all in favor, aye, or all opposed, aye. That is very unusual in most UN practice. What we see in most processes is typically there's a time, and if there's silence, if there's a time for objections, if there's silence, it means that we go forward. This is slightly different. Any member can actually call for a roll call, which then goes down the list of countries. And so, Albania, Algeria, nay, like all of these different things to give you that the country by country announcement of their decision, which is another way of also saying that this is a public voting process. If some of you witnessed in the past in any of the conferences of the parties, or for the pollution conventions especially, or for some aspects of the plastics treaty negotiations, where we had votes and there was a call to have like a physical hard vote, not just the silence and time for objections. It's a tense moment. There's a lot of drama. UN security bars the doors. Nobody goes in or out, and everyone walks up and they cast a paper ballot. This is very different. This is open. This is public. So it's a very different flavor. And finally, if there is a tie, then the measure is considered to be rejected. So if you don't get the full majority, the tie tells you, sorry, you have not succeeded. I should also point out that since creating this slide, and this was only created yesterday morning, but since creating this slide, we had the outcomes from Belém, from COP30 in Belém, and a number of complaints were raised at the very last minute regarding the lack of acknowledgement on certain points of order that were taken before having the votes. So just to point out that we have often seen the issues that come up in one treaty context or in one negotiation context kind of coming over into the next one if they're very close by in time. So in the event that there are rules of procedure challenges based on points of order, so saying that something is not being done within the rules of procedure and with the standard practice, that can be raised at any point, and it can be raised when we're talking about voting only if it's a thing about the actual following of the rules. So because we have seen this happen in some other practices, I wanted you to know that it could increase the tension sometimes, because there is that potential to have the resolution voting process be a bit more dragged out by points of order and other questions being raised. So that is always a possibility. If there is anyone who is particularly fascinated by these types of challenges and wants to learn more, please let me know. I didn't want to subject all of you to this, but you certainly can send me a message and I'm happy to talk about all of that there. I should also point out, obviously, we have the WhatsApp groups, etc. For those of you who will be on the ground, if at any point you have questions and you aren't sure about something, please send me a message. I'm happy to answer in real time. In terms of what the physical agendas look like, for UNEA, we have a bit of a different setup than we have for some of the other negotiation processes. So there are the pre-days, and some of you may be registered for these as well. The pre-sessions, which are things particularly like the open-ended committee of permanent representatives, the OECPR. The OECPR itself is a meeting of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, which are the highest level. So they are representatives of all member states who have permanent representatives based in Nairobi. And they are the ones that actually guide the policy and give policy suggestions and policy recommendations to UNEA itself. So they are the advisory and guiding body here before we get to the overarching UNEA body. They have been conducting some informal meetings and are continuing to and will continue to try to facilitate information sharing and also some pre-negotiation sessions for some of the proposed resolutions that we've seen coming out for UNEA to try to get alignment and agreement when we go into UNEA and not have a lot of excessive kind of negotiation and discussion during UNEA itself. We use somewhat different terminology here, certainly for those of you who are coming from plastics or from the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions or the Minamata Convention. Some of this language is a little bit different. So rather than talking about the meetings of the members or COP per se meetings, we talk about meetings of the cow. We are not meeting to have a glass of milk. We are not meeting out in a farm to visit some cows, although we are talking about the committee of the whole. So the cow refers to the committee of the whole. And as with most other processes, there is an opening, a plenary meeting that will be of the cow, so everyone coming together. This includes civil society, it includes major groups, it includes observers generally, as well as the member states. And then at that point, we also see the decision we're going to break into future contact groups. They are called contact groups of the cow. And they meet periodically. The schedule keeps updating. And I do encourage, if you can get the app on your phone, it is very useful to have the app because it is kind of live, real-time updating of the schedule. At the moment, there are 2 contact groups that have been established for UNEA 7. We have yet to see the full list of resolutions that will be assigned to each one, but it does seem right now that we will only have 2, at least it's anticipated we'll only have 2. So we won't have multiple meeting at the same time. So probably have the 2 meeting at the same time. And they will do the work that we are traditionally kind of familiar with in terms of contact groups. So that's where the countries will come together and really negotiate out the terms. Depending on the time frame, there may be some limited involvement and interaction for civil society, for observers. But as in many processes, the place to really kind of make your voices heard is, well, there are several. You can hallways, elevators, in the queue for food and coffee. Coffee is always critical. You can always make your voices heard there, as well as in events and gatherings, because there will be limited time for actual interventions during, certainly during the plenary meetings and during the contact groups. So it is important to figure out kind of how you're going to have your meetings and structure, which is why I'm giving you this understanding of what the week will look like. There is a high level segment as well. So at a certain point, if you're looking at the app or if you're looking at the schedule, you will see that there is a point where there's the cow itself closes, it's closing plenary, and then we pick up with the opening segment, high-level segment, national statement, and then we go into the closing segment there as well. And at that point, the idea is you have the very high-level ministers, et cetera, who are there to take votes, to endorse and adopt various forms of new activities and resolutions for UNEA, and to bring the work of UNEA itself to a close. This is for those of you who had participated in the CYMG process that led to the Global Framework on Chemicals. It's actually very similar to that type of process. And throughout, there are both official side events and meetings, and also a number of unofficial side events that will typically be taking place in the Gigiri area, often around like the Tribute Hotel or the Village Market area, where we will see a number of people gathered together, certainly because there are so few plastics, for those of you who are involved in plastics, because there are so few plastics official side events on the schedule. We know that there will be several that are being held offsite as well. And certainly I want to commend the CYMG and YPAN for sponsoring and co-sponsoring and convening official side events as well as unofficial events, because those are also very important. And the work that goes on in the cow is very important, and the contact groups is very important. But if you are coming as a member of an observer organization, these types of side events are also really critical, because it's where you meet a lot of people. It's where you're able to share a lot of your views and your experiences, and often meet not only other observers and perhaps other UN agencies, but also to meet negotiators from various countries. So I really do encourage you not only to be in the conference themselves, but also to go out into those events, because it's a way for many of us to really make connections and to build much deeper contacts coming out of UNEA. And finally, and then I will stop talking and then we will get to questions. Hopefully there are some. But what are we going to be talking about? So we know what UNEA is. We know that it started off as a bit less democratic, and now it has become far more in terms of the structure. Well, the governing council was, and now the structure of UNEA is a bit more open. We know who's involved. We know how the process works. We know what the actual schedule will look like. But what are we going to be talking about at UNEA 7? Because things change from every UNEA, so it's important. There are two types of draft resolutions that we're looking at here. So the first type is the type that's already easily publicly available. So if you Google UNEA 7 official documents, they will come up. And these are draft resolutions that have been suggested by the Secretariat and that typically focus on existing and ongoing work, processes, et cetera, that have been the focus of UNEP and UNEA resolutions and UNEP work. I mean, UNEA 6 and 5, et cetera, to see where they are, to take stock of where they are. I see, okay, we're doing a stock taking effort. Where are we on mining and minerals, for example? Where are we on sand and dust storms? Because this is actually a really important topic. Where are we on the sound management of chemicals and wastes? And where are we on lead and cadmium and arsenic and organotins? A word that spell check still hates. So I'm hoping it's, no, it is spelled correctly, but the spell check still hates no matter what. So the idea here is that we have some resolutions that come from the Secretariat rather than the member states. They obviously are done in consultation with the member states, and they look at how are we progressing on these issues? How are we progressing on the creation of the Science Policy Panel, for example, which was created? So that's one body that will be looked at. And the UNEA membership can say, yes, we want to look at this, or no, we really don't care. We're leaving that to the side. There are other things we want to talk about. And the other things we want to talk about come from member states. And so these are a bit more difficult to find at present. They will obviously be made available when we are closer to UNEA itself. But these are newly proposed measures, so newly proposed resolutions that come from the member states. And there are a number of them. I have tried very, very hard to briefly summarize and paraphrase many of them. And I was afraid that if I gave a full bullet point list, your eyes may glaze over. But there are some really interesting ones. So some of the things that we will be talking about at UNEA 7 include, and this is a really overarching theme, MEA, multilateral environmental agreements, convergence and cooperation. So the question here is, it's a very international organizations and international law driven question of, we have a number of MEAs, right? We have, yes, I really do keep these on my desk. We have all three: Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm. There are all three right here. We have Minamata, we have the Global Framework on Chemicals, we have now the Science Policy Panel, we have obviously the Montreal Protocol, and sorry, there is some feedback in the background. If your mic is open, please could you close it? Thank you. And we have a number of other different pollution-related treaties. We also have things like the Convention on Biological Diversity, which overlaps everything, the UNFCCC, and associated protocols. And so the question is increasingly becoming, in a world where resources are more scarce, where geopolitically there is a lot more tension, how do we make sure that all of these independent bodies that are associated with the treaties work together so that they're sharing resources, they're sharing knowledge, and they're not kind of duplicating efforts in terms of spending a lot of money organizationally, but also in terms of making countries spend a lot of time and money and human capital trying to report on very similar topics, but having to create new reports for each one, for each treaty, rather than just being able to say have a uniform reporting process that cuts across all three of these or a few others. So that is what we're going to see with the focus of the MEA convergence and cooperation area. We have a really interesting one on glaciers and cryosphere protection. Which may seem very esoteric, but it is important, especially for those of you who are interested in things like pollution, because there are references at the moment, at least, to microplastics and to other types of pollution, as well as air pollution and impacts from climate change. So this could be very interesting. The sound management of chemicals and waste, which is a very comprehensive proposal coming from Switzerland. We also have proposals on the environmental dimensions of antimicrobial resistance, AMR, known as AMR, which is an increasingly important topic that had been actually the focus of a quadripartite, so a four UN organization declaration during the last General Assembly meeting. So trying to put that into place. We have a focus on environmentally sound management of mining of minerals and metals, which is near and dear to certainly Shallon's heart as well as mine, and a building off of previous work from UNEA 6. For almost everyone on this particular bootcamp session, and those of us who are no longer children or youth, but who are very strong friends and allies, there is a resolution on ensuring the meaningful participation of children and youth throughout the UNEA process, throughout the implementation process for MEAs, et cetera. So this could be quite important, not only to have potentially passed at UNEA, but also to guide the role of, for example, the major groups in relation to children and youth, and giving this special place that is really needed for children and youth. So that's really critical. We have a resolution proposed on crimes that affect the environment. I wanted to highlight this to point out this does not mean necessarily ecocide. So there had been a proposal which was ultimately removed, taken back by a member state, to have a particular resolution that would have been on recognizing the crime of ecocide. That actually was coming out of the IUCN. I should mention this, the IUCN World Congress meeting, which happens every 5 years, which just happened in October. and where we had adopted that as a resolution in the IUCN context, but it was removed at UNEA, so it won't be discussed at UNEA. Crimes that affect the environment here are considered to be crimes that are at the national level. Certain types of pollution, oil spills, etc., that would affect the environment in some way. So we're not talking about ecocid, and I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. AI, artificial intelligence for people and planet. And this is one that Shellen and I go back and forth on a lot because I am much older and a bit crankier on AI. But the idea here is that we have a resolution currently calling for both the recognition that AI can be very valuable for the potential, for example, to figure out where environmental problems are, to figure out the causes of pollution and environmental degradation, et cetera, but that it also can cause environmental damage, especially given the amount of energy and other inputs it requires. We have some efforts to focus on sports, the importance of sports for a resilient planet. We also have a resolution proposal at the present moment on protecting deep sea ecosystems. We have one on the management of fires, which is really critical, especially for pollution concerns. The climate resilience of coral reefs is another one. And also the issue of sargassum seaweed blooms, which actually ties very closely to pollution in many levels. There are some others as well that typically relate to more governance issues internally in UNEA. I didn't want to focus too much on that. But all of this is to say that there are a great deal of topics that are on the table for UNEA 7. So as we get to it, we may see a few of these resolutions removed for a number of geopolitical reasons. We may see some mergers of proposals coming forward again, but there will be a number of different things to talk about. And as we're talking about them, and this is the final slide, and I will stop sharing momentarily. As we're talking about these things, and as you're participating in discussions about this, as you're listening as well as sharing viewpoints, I think it's really important to remember the structure of UNEA and how we got here, and that it is intended to be a more democratic organization, and it is a place for the major groups to certainly have a presence and to speak and share views and share expertise that you have that others don't. So please do make sure that you share it. You now have an understanding of how the voting process works. You have an understanding of the procedural aspects and some of the history so that you can understand the context of where we're meeting and what we're doing. So hopefully this has been useful for you to prep you for some of the issues coming up, as well as the background and the structure and what the actual sessions will look like when we're there. If you have questions, I see a number of comments in the chat. I'll stop sharing my screen. If you have questions or need anything, please, obviously, don't be afraid to reach out while we are there. And I will turn it over to Shellen for questions or comments. So Shellen, go take it away, please.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for attending. Eddie, yes, always love your presentations.
Oh my God.
I'm seeing
Thank
in the
you, but
chat, I agree
no.
with Mercy.
Thank you, Mercy. You guys are way too kind, really. Thank you. I appreciate it. But I'm just, if it's useful, it's useful. This is good. I'm so glad. And seriously, do not be strangers. Come, if you see me, please come say hi. Okay. Like at Plastics, it was wonderful because I got to actually meet all of you in person. So please come say hi or send a message and we'll get a coffee. Oh, wait.
Yes, and if you see any Alex or I guess personally I get the feedback a lot that I seem to be busy or look busy. I'm always able to talk to people. I will say I have ADHD, so I am a pro at multitasking. So often Alex have witnessed this. I'll be talking and working at the same time because there's never an ending amount of work. So even though I look busy, please come and say hello. I also will have
Absolutely.
chocolate like
Always.
Alex. So
Oh, yes.
yes. So
Yes.
yeah, but go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, no, just questions. If anybody has questions,
Please let us
comments.
know.
I am
And yes,
see the quiz question and working on the quiz. I'm working on I'm a little bit behind. Working on all that right now. We'll have it to you by the end of the session or a little bit after the session.
And I see a question from
Yes, Samuel.
Okay, sorry for the.
Samuel. Yeah.
My name is Samuel Weswa. Sorry for coming in late and interjecting between the conversations.
No
I
worries.
work for a language chat community-based organization based in Kisumu, Kenya, and I just want to thank you people for organizing such a meeting. It helps us understand and have a conversation to know each other more and learn about our experiences as we share them as well. For today, I'll have no questions, but moving further, I think I'll even have more more good questions for these meetings. Thank you so much.
Excellent, Samuel. Thank you. It was wonderful to meet you. Please, find us at UNEA. Please say hi. We really want to meet as many of you as we can. And when questions come to mind, please always send them. It doesn't matter what time. We all kind of work on global time zones. So please, anytime, let us know as they're going on to let us know. I see some questions in the chat, and I also see some hands. So, Shellen, what shall we be doing?
Yes, I guess one maybe question, and I think this is all kind of pondering in the room, being the YPAN, being also co-hosted by YPAN. Is there a reason why plastics aren't on the official UNEA 7 agenda yet? Let's just get that out of the way.
So this is entirely speculation. I have no inside information, but my understanding is that there is a concern for many of you. You will be aware of this, that during the negotiation process for the plastics treaty, we've had a number of questions about the full life cycle of plastic pollution and whether it should be part of the negotiations or not. Now, the UNEA 514 resolution does reference full life cycle. But there's a question of what does full life cycle mean as well. And certainly there are some countries that very adamantly think about it more as a waste management issue than a full life cycle issue. My understanding is that the concern is if you put plastics on the agenda for UNEA 7, you allow the resolution to be opened, 514 to be opened and addressed and reopened essentially. And you could then have challenges raised to its language. You could have proposals made to change that language and to perhaps weaken it or to make it only a focus on a waste management treaty, et cetera. So that would be a reason not for it to be on the table at this point, and just to try to kind of keep everybody's heads down. We don't talk about it. It's not there. We ignore it, and hope that we can get through UNEA without reopening the resolution at this point. Whether that happens, I do not know. If I had a crystal ball, I would tell you, but I don't know.
Awesome. And let's then we'll go to one question in the chat first, and then we'll take questions from the floor. So the first question from the CYMG participant is, what is the legal procedure when a chairperson neglects point of order or flag raised during plenary and gavel to adopt the decision? Is there any way to undo the adoption until the objecting party agrees? An example could be consensus-based MEAs.
Yeah, and I think that this question may be informed by what happened yesterday at Belém, because there were a number of questions about procedural points of order that were raised, where the chair did not address that. So theoretically, once the chair gavels something closed, it is closed, and you would have to wait until the next meeting to make any type of complaint or to raise any type of point of order against that particular issue. Now, if it is a member state and there's a feeling that they were persistently ignored, that could be raised to certainly to the secretariat. It could, as a complaint about logistical issues, it could be raised to the executive director. But once something is done, once it is gabbled shut, technically we would have to have another meeting before that is able to be addressed. If it is gabbled closed as an agenda item, and then we continue on in the meeting to something else. So if we're talking about, for example, a resolution on sand and dust, and then that is gavelled and the chair moves on to the next topic, but a country feels that it was not having some type of acknowledgement of its point of order made, it could then raise that issue in the next topic. So if we moved on from sand and glaciers to mining and metals, there could then be a raising of a prior point of order there. But if the actual session was closed, if the gaveling closed, to gavel close the session, then you would have to wait for another session, which is not, I know, the answer anyone wants to hear. But sadly, that is the answer. It's a great question. Thank you. And I think we'll be hearing a lot more about procedural issues like that coming out of Belém.
Awesome. Now let's go to Rita, and then we'll go to Abdul. Then we'll
Rita,
take 2 more questions from the chat.
Rita, I have missed you. How are you? Good to see
I'm
you.
good. Well, we need to talk. Hello,
We
everyone. Hi,
do.
Shalom. So thank you so much, Alex, for the wonderful, informative session, and Shalom for putting it together and the whole team. My question is there a recommended number of resolutions to be adopted for each assembly? And what happens to those that are not adopted? Are they just forgotten and dealt away with, or can they be raised in another session?
It's an
Thank
excellent
you.
question. Thank you. So there is no recommended number. It's basically as many as we can get, right? As many as we can get through meaningfully. But if a proposal comes up at UNEA 7 and it isn't adopted, it can certainly come back. So there's no bar. It could come back again. And what we might see actually is if it comes up for the first time here at UNEA 7 and there are issues or pushback or areas where you can't get an agreement, that then goes into the planning for UNEA 8. So it might come back on the agenda for UNEA 8 with different wording, because member states can propose these types of things up until a very late in time deadline. So they could take whatever was learned from UNEA 7 and then put it into UNEA 8 for another proposal. So they may end when UNEA 7 ends, but they don't have to die. They can certainly come back to live another life. It's UNEA 8 or 9 or whenever, definitely. But it's an excellent question and also highlights the point that even if there's a resolution you're super attached to and it doesn't get passed, there is still always hope. So thank you, Rita. You always get me back to hope somehow. There is always hope for it coming back again.
Thank you, Alex. That's all for now.
Of course. And I hope to see you soon.
Looking forward. Me too. Great.
Great. Let's go to Abdul.
Yes,
Hello,
excellent. Abdul, lovely to meet you. Hello.
yeah, hello, good afternoon. I'm from Ghana. Sorry you can see my face. My laptop doesn't have a webcam. So
No
my
worries.
my question is about the coming meeting that is happening in December. That's in Kenya.
Mhm.
I applied to actually be there. I've not actually received anything to show that I'll be attending or whether there's funding opportunities or in that regard, or some people have been selected to actually attend. I just want to inquire to see if there are some maybe about the applications and all those stuffs. Thank you very much.
Of course, and thank you for the question. It's so important. I'm going to defer to Shellen on that, I think. But
Yeah, so there, as far as I know, like unfortunately, all the applications have been selected. You should have been notified. Hopefully, I'm not in charge of it though, so I would not know completely, but I would assume, unfortunately, by now, if you did not get an email, you are not selected, but definitely try for next time. I will also say, as far as CYMG goes, it was it was more competitive than getting into, let's say, an Ivy League university, where only about 1% were selected for some type of funding. And even for self-funded as well, we got example over 400 applications for people who said they want accreditation and are willing to self-fund, but we were only able to select about 25 of them. So just so you know how competitive this process is, regardless of who you are, where you're from.
Thank you
Excuse
very
me.
much. Thank you.
Good evening, Shalom.
Yes, hold on. Now we're going to take 2 more questions from the chat, then we'll get to your question. So remember to raise your hand as well, and we'll go in that order. So the next question is there any recommended number of resolutions for each UNEA? What happens?
I think we got that one from Rita already. Yes.
We got that one. But I also wanted to mention there is one of the resolutions in there. I believe it's from Bolivia that was from UNEA 6 and then was added to UNEA 7.
7, yeah.
Was it pulled again?
I think it was pulled.
Yeah. So this is just, it's
my
an
understanding is it
example
was
of
pulled.
that.
Yeah. And absolutely, and that can happen for any number of reasons. And there are, all sorts of negotiation points as to why, and kind of background conversation points as to why, but it will probably come back for UNEA 8, hopefully.
Yes. All right. I apologize. I'm going to probably pronounce this name wrong, but Tamsila?
Tamsila, is that you?
Hello, it's me, Tamsila.
Yes. So good to hear you. Please, what is your question?
Yeah, first of all, I have no question. I'm Tamsila Tasim from Pakistan, and especially I want to say thank you for this wonderful presentation. I'm here to admire your presentation. I really like it. As a researcher, I'm thinking about to pursue to do some work about the plastic degradation, especially PVC. So I found this presentation very, very helpful. So I just want to say thank you, and I hope that you will continue this session. It was so informative and so helpful for me. Thank you.
I'm so very glad, and I would really encourage you to continue with that type of research. We need that more than any other point. So please consider that as a really viable option. Please do that if you can, and stay in touch with us. And find us email or WhatsApp or LinkedIn or anything. Please let us know how you're going with the research too.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tamsila.
Bianca.
Yes.
Hi, Bianca.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Bianca. I'm from South Sudan. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the great presentation. I really enjoyed, and it was really wonderful. I was looking forward to hear more about this program from you. Actually, it really came to pass. So I'm very excited to attend this today. Thank you. It's not a question, but an appreciation. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bianca. Thank you. It's wonderful to be able to do this with all of you and to get to chat with so many of you and answer questions and just share this information, because it is something that when Sheldon and I were sitting there, I don't even remember what time it was, in Korea on the floor, because there were no more chairs. And so we were sitting on the floor and having this conversation. We realized that, we need all of your voices and we need all of you. You have so many different insights and perspectives, and it's such a different system. So we need to help get all your voices there. So thank you. It truly is a pleasure to do this.
Thank you.
And I'm seeing so many exchanges in the chat of LinkedIn and of Instagram. This is fantastic. Please find me if you would like. Please find me and also message, for when you'll be in Kenya and as you're moving on in the future. Keep in touch, please, all of you. And there is a question in the chat about certificates. So I don't know if Shellen, you want to answer that in the...
Yes, if you hear me typing, I'm finalizing everything right now. The form for the certificates will be shared at the very end of the session before we log off. Currently also testing it through some of the MEA, YPAN, CYMG people that are helping out as well. So it will be very soon.
Okay. And as I said, the quiz will not be difficult. I promise. Promise. It really isn't. It looks like we have 4 more hands. Should we go to some of those while you're doing that? You want me to handle that?
Yes. Go for it.
Okay. So Abdul Ghani, I apologize if I mispronounced that. Please, you have the floor.
Okay. Good day, everyone, and thank you, Doctor, for the wonderful presentation. My name is Abdul Ghani from Abuja, Nigeria, and I'm happy to say that I'll be attending YEA in the Nairobi, Kenya. First off, I really appreciate this wonderful opportunity because it's one of those things you have to really thank God for being part of. Now, my question is this. I understand that this is something that is highly competitive, but for me, we are more involved. I mean, the youth are more involved when it comes to climate and anything that surrounds it. So I'm selected to attend the YEA 29th and 30th, but I don't know if that truly qualifies to attend the UNEA 7. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will defer to Shellen on that, but first of all, congratulations for attending, and hopefully we will get to see you there, and also increase the presence of youth voices in areas other than climate, because it's really important that your voices are present everywhere. But Shellen, if YEA, does that also mean UNEA?
So that's a great question. And no, that does not mean UNEA. So that is a separate accreditation, because the YEA is through the Children and Youth Major Group to UNEP. So many acronyms, CYMG, and the registration is approved through us. However, UNEA is approved by the UN or the coordination team for UNEA. And so the difference is that you have to get an accreditation from an official organization that's registered with UNEP. So they have to go through this very extensive process and be an organization for at least 3 years. Unfortunately, registration's closed as well, and I'm told they're not able to extend it. So, but maybe next year. And are you talking about, are you planning on attending in person or online? Because there's in person and online as well.
Okay, because I will be in Nairobi, so that's why I asked the question, because I already booked my flight, I already secured my accommodation. I just don't know, so that if I may need to extend it or I just leave it as is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. I would leave it as is if you don't have accreditation for now, unfortunately.
Yes.
And I know someone asked, is the Global Plastic Action Partnership still active, and how can this be harassed to get results? That is a great question. And I'm not completely sure. I have to look it up. There are many things. There are many different things. I know there has been one that was paused due to the Trump regime as well. So I would have to look that up and see, and I can look that up and get back to you. My phone is blowing up a little bit at the moment, so give me some time. And my WhatsApp.
And I see 2 questions that I can just address quickly in the chat, and then go to Ivy, and then we'll go back and forth. But the recording will be shared, so there's that. And then I had seen a question, actually 2. The question about the text of the youth focused, children and youth focused resolution that will be available soon. as soon as all the conference documents are uploaded. So there is definitely that, and please do look at it, and please do weigh in on it once it's available. And then Rita had another really great question about if there's a resolution that kind of ends 1 year and then it comes back in the next session, what is the difference? So it's a very technical thing in that when we close the UNEA sessions, everything is closed. So if it's not adopted, it essentially it no longer exists. It's no longer open for discussion. So we have to reintroduce, even if it's the exact same text, we have to reintroduce the particular resolution draft at the next UNEA as another new, quote unquote, new resolution. So we can bring it to UNEA 7 because it would have stayed at UNEA 6 only, so they don't transfer over. But if you have more questions on this, I am always happy to answer them, Rita. So please tell me. Or we can talk about it more, hopefully, in Nairobi. But I know Ivy has been waiting very patiently. So Ivy, lovely to meet you. I love the photo that you have, the image you have is fantastic. It's brilliant. So please, what is the question?
Yes, so hi, I hope you can hear me. Yeah, so
Absolutely, yeah.
mine was just on the resolutions. I was just asking if we'll be getting them perhaps in real time, or maybe they'll just be released closer to the. I know you said that, but I would just hate for a situation where a session is ongoing and I don't really have the document to cross-check whatever is being discussed.
Absolutely.
So maybe
Absolutely.
if you
So
can.
they'll be released closer in time to UNEA. And then as there are updates, as there are textual proposals being made, my understanding is that they will be available on the app as they have been for some other processes as well. So if you download the app, which if you go to UNEA and if you Google UNEA 7 like official documents, or even UNEA 7 proposals, resolutions, the website itself will have a QR code you can scan to then upload the app, and the app will, once we're in session or when we're about to begin session, we'll start having those documents available. So then in real time, you can get those proposals. But if you have questions or if you have issues getting them, please, during the sessions, let us know. And I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Okay,
Let's
thank
see.
you. I think thank you very much for answering.
Of course. Thank you so much, Ivy. Lovely to meet you. And Mercy, thank you. I see the comments in the chat. You are way too kind. Thank you. Let's see. So we have, let's see, Joseph next.
Good evening, madam. Here in Tanzania, I'm Joseph from Tanzania. Can you hear me?
Lovely to meet you. We can hear you perfectly. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, lovely too. I would like to ask, how can I attend the UNEA 7 meeting, and how can I register myself? Because I think it will be self-funded, or if it is sponsored, so that I can join the meeting to share together what in Tanzania we are doing. So is there any link or anything that I can
My
do that so
understanding.
that I can be? Yes.
Thank you, Joseph.
Yeah, so
Shannon, go ahead.
Unfortunately, there is not a way to attend it in person right now. My best advice for you is to sign up for CYMG and YPAN. CYMG is what handles UNEA, and to look out for the next session of UNEA for accreditation. Self-funding, as I will say, is as competitive with UNEA as funded. I would say slightly less. So it's not completely guaranteed, regardless if you are self-funded or apply for funding for you to get accreditation. You'd be surprised how many people apply. And because you rely on other organizations that are accredited and go through this very strict process with the UN, we're not able to, unfortunately, allow everyone who requested accreditation to join.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. You always know far more than I do. Let's see. I see that we have several hands up, and then also a question just came in from Caroline. So are we able to go a little while longer, Shellen, or do we need to close soon?
Yeah. I also saw there was a question here from there was a
Caroline?
question that we missed when let's answer one in the chat. When a decision is taken by the decision-making body of an MEA, actual MEA, not INC. Hold on, now
Yes.
it disappeared. Will it be binding from day one, or does it need to pass another process?
So it will be binding for day one on the member states. If it is something like an annex or an amendment, then it would need to have approval at the national level. So it would need to go back to the national level, and they would need to say adopt a piece of legislation that amends the Basel Convention to reflect something that was agreed to in the COP. But otherwise, it becomes binding as of whatever the text is. So sometimes it will say it becomes binding 30 days from the date of closure of the COP, or 30 days from the date of agreement. Sometimes it'll be 90 days, depending on how technical it is, but it will typically go into place right away. So thank you for that. And let's see, shall I go to Bernard? I see, Bernard, you've been patiently waiting, so please welcome, and please let us know your question.
Hello, I'm Japanese Safari Bernard. I'm coming from DRC, and so like I'm coming from DRC, it is a French country, so my English is not good.
Oh non, c'est bien
I
ça.
have...
En français, c'est mieux. Oui.
Ok. So, je participais depuis à vos activités depuis avril, et maintenant, en ce moment-ci, parce que je suis master en environnement et je travaille beaucoup plus sur le plastique, sur la valorisation des déchets plastiques. Et puis, en ce moment, je suis en train de mettre en place un programme pour la valorisation, la transformation des déchets plastiques en matériaux de construction que nous avons lancé pour paver certaines ruelles et certaines routes ici. Maintenant, je voudrais savoir dans quelle mesure, parce que je participe à vos séances depuis avril, vous pouvez m'aider en termes de recommandations, ou en quelle mesure je peux trouver en vous certains partenariats pour augmenter mes chances, mes chances à venir. En quelque sorte, c'était ça ma question, le sens de partenariat et aussi de recommandations, comment je peux avoir ça venant de vous.
C'est une question fantastique, Benoît. S'il vous plaît, m'envoyez un message sur WhatsApp. Je vais te donner ça, le WhatsApp. Everyone, to kind of give a bit of background, a really fascinating question from Bernard on the work he's doing as a master's at master's level on various types of plastics and associated products and issues. So I will encourage him to contact me. I will put my WhatsApp in the chat. Obviously, everyone, please do feel free as well. Just let me know who you are, so I can have your names. But s'il vous plaît, m'envoyez un message et on peut parler un peu dans le futur, si c'est possible. Mais c'est si important ça. Il y a des développements sur BRS, les conventions de Bâle et Rotterdam et Stockholm. Il y a quelque chose comme une Mercury aussi, une Minamata, qui sont très importantes. Et peut-être les discussions pour le GFC, le Global Framework on Chemicals. Ça, c'est peut-être très important pour toi. Alors, s'il vous plaît, me donnez un message et on va parler un peu. And I'm going to put my WhatsApp right now in the chat.
Right. While you're doing that, I will, since we're getting towards the end, I will share the link for the quiz and certificate. You should,
Excellent.
Yes. We thank you, Vaughn, Samuel, Stephen, for helping testing it. You will have to get 100% in order to get the certificate. we want to make sure this time we learn from last time, people actually attend and learn as well from the session, and you have ultimate attempts. Your certificate should be issued to you automatically once you pass it, thankfully, to a new program we installed. So no manual emailing. It saves a lot of time for all of us. And this will be open for about a week. Once we post the recording, after that, we will close it. We need to move on with our lives. And there's a lot going on with UNEA, YPAN, and CYMG as well. I guess last thing before we close the session is, we got a lot of new responses, so I will send out another email later today. We are currently having a logo competition for the Youth Plastic Action Network. As Vaughn, I see him smiling right now, and Alex knows that as the interim chair, even though I have a title, I'm very much in a collaborative standpoint as well, and really eager for everyone to collaborate. We are also building the governance building process, and that's going to be through different consultations. So really anybody that wants to contribute is able to contribute, and hopefully we can create something that everyone is excited about, regardless of who you are, if you have a fancy title or not as well. So there's 2 different opportunities right now for the Youth Plastic Action Network, and I will send out another email as well as in the chats later on. And we would, sorry, I got a little bit distracted with the comments. ADHD does that sometimes. And so we look forward to that as well. I know with CYMG, our focus is UNEA, but after UNEA, I'm sure there'll be other opportunities to get involved as well. And depending on the interest, if we might do hopefully we'll do another Youth Plastic Action Network information session in the coming weeks, probably after the new year. But otherwise, let's continue. Thank you, Alex, for letting me take a little bit longer.
Oh, no, absolutely. I think it's really important. Are we going to the quiz
good.
now? Or do we have time for a question or 2 more?
Yeah, we can do questions. One last thing, though, I forgot to add, that the logo won't be decided by the coordination team. It will be decided by everyone. So it will be voted on by whether you're a member, whether you're an ally. I told Alex this week she'll be able to vote for it. So kind of very excited, especially if you're at UNEA, but it will be open to the public for everybody, that as long as the certificates as long as the logos meet the guidelines, that you'll be able to vote for the logo with YPAN, which I don't think it's been done before with the youth constituency. So we're really excited to see how that turns out. And I think it will be fun for those of us at UNEA and even off the camera for that week with voting to really see which logo is going to be the one for YPAN. We're putting it in everyone's hands.
Yes, and we are all excited to see those. So please, if there are any moments where you have free time and have the desire to do it, please give us your logo designs. And there's a question from Dorothy I see in the chat about how to send in the logos. Please do it, Dorothy. I'm hoping we see lots of things. Excellent.
I will add it. I will say this. I've never have said it before. We have 5 logos already submitted. So
this is amazing.
The deadline for the YPAN coordination team, as well, interim coordination team, I should say, as well as the logo competition, will be closing on December 2nd at 23:59 UTC.
So please get them in, because we're all super excited to see them.
We are.
And yeah, it's a great thing. It is, just as a friend, as an ally. It's a great thing. So I know that Dorothy, I'm not sure if that is the same question. If it's not, obviously let us know. Rong, you've had your hand raised for a while, so I want to make sure we get to you. And then I've seen several questions, one from Caroline and then several others about financing. So we'll get to that momentarily. But Rong, if you're still there and have your hand up, please let us know.
Hi, Alex. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. Unfortunately, I cannot turn my video on, but
No worries.
for the unstable connection now. But yeah, I look forward to connecting with you at UNEA 7, and I'm also going to be following negotiations on the BSR, and also hopefully
Great.
get to hear a little more about the plastics, even if it's not included in the official agenda items. But my question was regarding one of the items that you talked about in regards to voting procedures. And so you mentioned that in a UNEA, it is a majority voting procedure. I was curious, has that always been the same, like since UNEA 1? How was that decided? Or if it has changed, has there been, like, why was the change? Because many of the other treaties may decide to use consensus-based decision-making instead of majority. And so just curious how that was decided on. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, and thank you. Right. It's a great question. I can't wait to see you and just sit down and have a chat in Nairobi. It will be really lovely. So the rules of procedure were actually adopted at or by UNEA 2. So for the first set of UNEA meetings, it was kind of the interim rules of procedure and based much more on what was coming out of the governing council, which was really quite different from the other MEA structures. And that process was started in 1972. So the rules of procedure that were used for the governing council were in many ways predating the rules of procedure we have now for all the different MEAs, which is why the feeling was we would keep the majority voting option there. It is very different than what we see, certainly as the UNFCCC is consensus. We have a number of different arguments now in plastics, as well as bracketed text in Minamata, some aspects of BRS, et cetera, where this is an ongoing debate as to whether or not we would ever break consensus, or if it's done, how serious it is. But the idea was really taking the prior practice from the governing council and then moving it back over into the UNEA entity, which is, it's kind of jarring for those of us who are working in those other spaces. It's really odd. But that's why we did it. It was we saw it done was for continuity. And the interesting thing, and I'm happy to share with you if you want, in let's see, 2022, 23, there was an evaluation of the rules of procedure done by UNEA. And they had a number of different meetings talking about different aspects of the rules of procedure, whether they should be updated, what other practices are. But the majority topic was not touched at all, which is very odd. But it was just not in any way touched. The voting options were completely left alone. So it's fascinating to me to see it. But that's kind of how we got here, was just the past precedent.
Right.
Yeah, I know. It's weird. It gets super weird, and it's an odd thing for us to think of. I think it really has to go back to 1972 and that mindset beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely.
But not
Thank you.
necessarily satisfying.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, also the different natures of different agencies and how they decide on different voting procedures and with the politics. So yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you very much. And I'll reach out directly.
Yeah, please do, and please just we'll get coffee and chat. Yes, Shellen. I could talk about voting all day. This is very sad. This is where I am, but.
I know, and if it wasn't, I know there's another CYMG meeting scheduled. Otherwise, we could talk all day long. And so you guys know where to get Alex as well. We'll see you at UNEA. Yeah, thank you guys for another great session. Safe travels.
Thank you all. Safe travels. Please keep in touch. If anyone has questions, if it's your first time going to Nairobi, etc., please let us know. For many of us, it's not. So we're happy to share what we know. And please stay well, stay safe while you're traveling. And we look forward to seeing many of you soon.
Yes, and
And
hopefully
thank you all.
we'll have to do more of this soon as well. Clearly that there's more people that want this, so we'll definitely consider doing more of these in the future.
Oh, definitely. You know, I'm always here, so absolutely.
Classic Alex
everyone.
line.
You know where to find me for advice or chocolate. Anyway, take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.